Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. Welcome to our 88th installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Chukas in the book of Numbers. Parshas Chukas famous for the paraduma, for the red heifer, right? Something that when the Kohen took the ashes of this animal, of this cow, and sprinkled it on someone who became impure, so the person became pure. The Kohen himself became impure. It's something that's in total paradox, doesn't make any sense. The whole idea of the paraduma, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's not logical, so it's what we call a chok, a law that doesn't make any sense. There are other laws that do make sense, which are called mishpatim, right? And that we've spoken about a number of times. There's also the story of Moshe Rabbeinu hitting the rock, not speaking to the rock, and the whole thing about how because he did not do that and seemingly sanctify God's name, then he wasn't allowed into the promised land. He wasn't allowed in the land of Israel. So this is going to need further clarification. So the Torah says, chapter 20, verse 7, in the book of Numbers, it says, Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, Take the staff, gather together the assembly, you and Aaron, your brother, and speak to the rock before their eyes, that it shall give its waters. You shall bring forth for them water from the rock, give drink to the assembly and to their animals. So then Moshe complains that they complain there's no water. He calls them rebels, etc. And Moshe says, we'll go a little bit further, Moshe took the staff before Hashem, as he commanded him. Moshe and Aaron gathered the congregation before the rock, said to them, Listen now, O rebels, shall we bring forth water for you from this rock? Moshe raised his arm, struck the rock with his staff twice. Abundant water came forth, the assembly and the animals drank. So Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, Because you do not believe in me, to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you will not bring this congregation to the land that I have given them. They are the waters of strife, where the children of Israel contended with Hashem, and he was sanctified through them. So that's verse, again, chapter 20, book of Numbers, starting with verse 7 to verse 13. So the whole story here seems a little bit strange. First of all, you have the people complaining. That's not so strange. They complain a lot, seemingly in the desert. So they're complaining they don't have water. So God says, I want you to speak to the rock, and I want you to bring forth water. So Moshe takes the staff and hits the rock. So he didn't do exactly what God commanded. He struck the rock twice, and all this water came out. Now, even though he struck the rock, I mean, regardless of whether he spoke to it or struck it, it's still a tremendous miracle, right? No question. I mean, anyone who strikes the rock and abundant water comes out, that's nothing short of miraculous. If he spoke to it, even more. Right, even more so. So the question is, what's really going on? That Moshe and Aaron are considered, they're considered like they don't believe in God. They don't have proper faith, and they don't sanctify God's name. So because they don't sanctify God's name, they're not allowed into the land. The whole thing's a little bit strange, a little bit difficult to understand. So comes along, Mori V'Rebbe, Rav Gon Moshe Star Shlita, brings down in Tam V'Das, his book on Chumash. He says a lot of things here. One is, he said, if we go back to the end of Parshas Shlach, right? Spoke a few weeks back about the sin of the spies. Moshe is commanded to hit the rock. Even back then, he's commanded to hit the rock in order to bring out water. So why does God want him to seemingly write that word seemingly? Why does he want him to strike the rock? So he says, because that generation, of Moshe himself and, this whole thing with the rock, he said that when he spoke, that whole generation, he was supposed to speak with the Shem HaMefurish. He was supposed to speak that the rock would give out water using God's ineffable name. So if he used God's ineffable name, then he would have been able to take water from this rock only by speaking to it. So that's pretty darn miraculous also. Here he uses the name of God, right? Had he used the name of God, that would have brought out the water. Now, before the giving of the Torah, even though it was said before the giving of the Torah, Jewish people weren't fitting to have Moshe use this name. So therefore, only through the staff, God's staff that had the name on it, right, that had this ineffable name on God's staff. So he took it and hit the rock, and water came out. But once the Torah is already given, so here my Rebbe says, once the Torah is already given, and the Jewish people on a much higher level, right? They had reached the level of where the world was before Adam and Eve had eaten from the tree, right? They went down right after sin of the golden calf. Nonetheless, after the giving of the Torah, they're on a much higher level, and they were considered pretty much like angels. They had reached this tremendously high spiritual level to receive the Torah from the mouth of God. Remember that when the Jewish people get the Torah, so the whole question, how many of the 10 Commandments they heard. Right? Some say they heard all the 10 Commandments. They died and came back to life. God brought them back to life after each one because it was too strong a spiritual experience. Others say it was only after the first two. Right? They heard the first of the 10 Commandments, died, God brings them back to life. Heard the second 10 Commandments, they died, God brings them back to life. So they're on a tremendously high level. In order that Moshe Rabbeinu should be able to bring the water and draw the water out from the rock by using God's name. And if he said God's name and the water comes out, that is a tremendous sanctification of God's name. It doesn't mean that using the stick is not a sanctification of God's name, not the same level, right? It's at a different, it's at a different level than had he spoke. Nonetheless, God wanted him to raise him to that level, to be able to be at that level in order that the water should come up. Now, it would seem though it's not really fair, because what happens? The Jewish people were complaining that they don't have water. Now, why don't they have water at this point? They don't have water because the merit of the well that they got water from was through Miriam. And Miriam, we saw, passed away. So since Miriam passed away, they don't have water, right? They don't have this miraculous well. They don't have this miraculous well. They're in a desert. Well, guess what? It gets very hot in the desert. And you can't go very long without water. So they don't have any water, but they complain. And they complain against Moshe. So Rabbi points out, if you look at the simple text over here, it says, who sinned? Children of Israel sinned. They're complaining, we want water. Moshe, where's the water? We're thirsty. Why can't we have any water? Where's the well? They complain. They totally complain against him. They fight against it. So, for him, that the water comes out, and it's such a miracle, regardless, he spoke to it, he hit it. The fact that he hit it is no less of a miracle in a certain way. So, why is it looked at as a sin on him? The fact that he strikes the rock, water comes out, they're complaining. So why look at it like, that Moshe doesn't listen, doesn't have proper faith, so to speak. Why look at it that way? It's their fault. They're the one that caused it. So Rabbi points out the sins, or however small they may be, of the generation that saw God face to face. Now we have to understand, as I mentioned many times, this generation is probably the greatest generation in the history of man. Simple reason is because they accepted the Torah on Mount Sinai. They were able to, withstand that experience. Okay, they died, came back to life, but you're talking about the greatest people of all time, right? The greatest generation, of all time that, saw God face to face. So we can't imagine who these people are. So, how can we say, simply they complain, right? The simple explanation is they complain. But if you're talking about the greatest generation in the history of man, we cannot look at this, at face value. So the rabbis tell us, why was he punished? He was punished because he called them rebels. Right? He called the Jewish people rebels. Now, even though he did that, and that's what the Talmud says, and says the Medrash as well, the Torah itself does not look at it as a sin. The Torah looks at striking the rock as a problem. Calling them rebels doesn't seem to be a problem. But what happened? Moshe and Aaron afterwards fall on their face to hear the words of God. And God's not angry with them. At least not for that. So we have to see, what is really going on and what is the nature of what Moshe did. So he says the explanation is like this. The fact that Jewish people complain. Why do they complain? They complain because they don't feel they have self-worth. They don't feel that they merited anything based on their own actions, because what happened now? They have no water. Who was the water in the merit of? Merit was of Miriam. Miriam's no longer here. There's no water. So they feel themselves as being lacking because the well was not there for their sake. They needed the merit of Miriam in order to drink water and have this water. Now, the other issue is not only they feel of their little worth, but they also feel they can't live to such a high standard, in spiritual terms, and live with miracles all the time. In other words, once they were in Egypt, they were on a much lower level. They come into the desert. What happens? It's supposed to be raised to a much higher level. So let's analyze that for a second. They go in as slaves. Well, they don't go in as slaves, but they're in Egypt. They're taken as slaves. They work to the bone. They almost disappear spiritually. 80% die in the plague of darkness. Only 20% come out. God prepares them, makes them into a nation, brings them to the mountain. There are other miracles that go on before they get to the mountain. They get to the mountain, they see fire, brimstone coming from the mountain. They hear God's voice too much, they die. Okay, God brings them back. They hear again, they die. But throughout, after getting the 10 Commandments, they go through miracle after miracle. Now, once they go through miracle after miracle, the issue is they don't think they can live to such a high standard. Meaning that, okay, they had all these miracles. You had Moshe, you had Aaron, you had Miriam, right? You had all three of them. You had all these miracles going on. Miriam disappears, there goes the well. So they didn't value their own merits. They were seemingly dependent on others. So they didn't want to live. God is trying to train them to live at a very high spiritual level. When they were in the desert, and what happened with the spies, had that not happened, they would have gone straight. They would have gone straight to the land of Israel, right? We spoke about the sin of the spies and how they thought, how they possibly could have thought that they wouldn't be able to overcome the giants in the land and all that. So, had they had proper faith in God, again, if you're talking about the greatest generation in the history of man, obviously they had proper faith. There was something very small that was missing. So here, my Rebbe points out, and he says, because of their holiness, they had a blemish in some level in their belief in God, right? According to their level. So when they complain, right, it's included, they're going after God. Where's the water? We can't live without water. They're not saying God can't provide it. What they're saying is maybe they don't merit themselves to have it. You live in a desert, you got a miraculous well. I mean, normally you don't have a well, you don't have an oasis anywhere in the desert, usually. So their level of belief was somewhat blemished. Now, even that being the case, God doesn't say anything. I mean, up until this point, they're complaining, and Moshe says, like, what do you want me to do with these people? They're going to stone me. They want meat till God gives them meat till it's coming out of their ears. Now they want water. Moshe's like, what do you want from me? These people are rebels. Once he says that these people are rebels, even though it doesn't look like a sin over here, because it seems like it's their own fault, right? Because they're ganging up against Moshe and Aaron. Nonetheless, God's wrath does not come out until they say, look at these rebels, right? Until Moshe says that, God's anger doesn't come out, and they're punished, and they're not allowed to enter the land. Why? Because going into the land, how are they going to go in? They're not just going to walk in, right? There are nations that are there that have giants that are much bigger than them, seemingly much stronger than them. So how are they going to enter the land? They are going to enter the land absolutely miraculously. Right? Again, they're going in on a miraculous nature. So, the fact that this happened, Moshe is not going to be the one to lead them in that fashion. Why? Because they don't understand the level that they're at, and therefore their level was somewhat blemished. So we have to analyze this a drop more, because again, at face value, even with that explanation, it still needs further clarification. What we're saying is like this: they go to the desert, they live through all the miracles. We would have thought, they're on this extremely, high level, which they are. But even so, how long can they last on that level? Saw the miracles in Egypt, saw the Egyptians die, they saw Egypt be decimated. They also saw most of the Jewish people don't come out. Come out from Egypt. Egyptians run after them. They're at the water, nothing to do. Nachshon ben Aminadav jumps in, water splits. They go through the sea. They work their way through the sea. The Egyptians are coming after them. They go on to dry land. God confuses them. He confuses the Egyptians. Jewish people make it out. Egyptians are still in there. And then God brings the waters on top of them. Okay, that's great. Now that they're in the desert, got no food, so they got the manna that's going to take care of them. They get to the mountain, they get the Torah. They see God face to face. So at all these points, miracles have been happening. God is working on their daily belief in these miracles. Now, the manna came every day. They were only allowed, to take for that day. They had to eat it up. They couldn't leave it over. Now, that's miraculous in and of itself. They got enough for each family. But then who's to say it's going to come the next day? And who's to say it's going to come after that? And who's to say they're going to get a double portion on Shabbos? Or on Friday? Because they're not allowed to take it in on Shabbos. You know what they say? Old Mother Hubbard. Nothing in the cupboard. So they have to have a tremendously strong belief, that God will provide. And God is going to take care of them. So it happens once, fine. Happens twice, fine. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. It's gone on for weeks. But who's to say it's going to happen tomorrow? Because at the end of the day, there's nothing left. There is no more food. And because there is no more food, we have no guarantee it's going to come. But God is directing them 100% for proper belief in Him. Because the ultimate test is going to be when they go into the land of Israel. Because the nations are going, the nations there are not going to make it so easy for them. So Moshe wants to send out the spies. God says, I don't think it's a good idea. Moshe says, I don't care. Send them out. God says, fine. Send them out. What happens? We know what happens, right? They give a bad report against the land of Israel. Because of that, they wander in the desert 40 years. That generation has to die out. Since that generation has to die out, they're not allowed to go into the land. Right? That generation is not allowed to go into the land. So at that point, when they see the giants, and they see the food, they see everything else, if God had taken care of them before, He's certainly going to take care of them now. Right? So we already spoke about, the mistake that they made. But I just want to point out, for clarity's sake, they were supposed to flex their emunah muscles. They were supposed to take in everything from the beginning till now, right? Till they were in Egypt and came out. They were in the desert. They came to the mountain. All these different things. They were supposed to take in and absorb the miracles. And to live on that high, miraculous level. They didn't think they could do it. They didn't think they had the merit themselves to warrant more miracles in the land. Because the land is God's backyard, right? It's His holy land. So they have to uphold God's word in the land. It's a very high level, right? A person has to, strive, to be in the land. The land of Israel today still has tremendous holiness, even though God's presence is there. And, the reason that you have the most holiness in the land again is because God's presence was here. But you also have the most amount of impurity. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Now, anyone who's ever been to the land, there's such a tremendous dichotomy between the religious and the non-religious, and all kinds of other things are going on to try and drive, the religious people out, or make life extremely difficult, which they have done. Years ago, and they made no bones about it, years ago they brought in all these Russians, and most of them, probably 98% of them, aren't Jewish, and they said explicitly, we're bringing in these Russians in order to offset the population of the ultra-Orthodox, right? Sort of drown us out, so we don't have as much power, or political power, or, whatever. So, it was a known thing these Russians weren't Jews, right? That they weren't Jewish. So, that is the reason that they brought them in. Now, you might say, oh, that's conjecture. Why would they do that? Because they're sonei das, right? Make no mistake. The government in the land of Israel, part of the Erev Rav, that's for sure. Part of the mixed multitude. And they hate religion. Sorry, I didn't translate that quick enough. Sonei das means that they hate religion. Why do they hate religion? Because when they started the country in the first place, they wanted a state of Jews, right? Not a religious state. They wanted to get rid, of all these trappings. They had the ability to save thousands during the Holocaust, and they turned people away. They weren't interested in ransoming European Jews, right? Eastern European Jews, in order to save them, to bring that antiquated old religion back to the land of Israel. They wanted new Israelis, people going to drain the swamps, not people going to, sit and learn these old books. So they have tremendous blood on their hands. So be that as it may. So you have a land that's holy because God's presence was here. But if you wouldn't have ultra-Orthodox Jews, it wouldn't look like, anything so special. Anyone's ever been to Tel Aviv? One of the most populous gay populations in the world. It happens to be in Tel Aviv. So you go there, you go other places, you wouldn't think you're in Israel at all. I mean, it's also devil worship in this country. I mean, so you say, how can you have the most holiness and have all these other things going on? Because that is that is exactly the contradiction. In other words, where you have the most holiness, you're going to have the most anti-holiness, the most impurity that's going to fight against that. So anyone who wants to come to the land of Israel, I'll cut to the chase. I'll make it clear. If you're going to come and live in the land and do whatever you're going to do and not adhere to what God wants, don't bother coming. It's going to cost you a lot more than it's worth. Now, that doesn't mean if you're going to live anywhere else and do whatever you want, that's right. We're not saying it's right, but when you do it in the palace of the king, right, which we mentioned many times, and you spit in God's face in his home, there's going to be much greater payback. So they want to come in. So they want to come in. Jewish people want to come, and they spy out the land, and they say there's no way. There's no possible way that we can overcome the land. So what's the connection over here? So the connection over here is same thing by the well. The fact that Miriam's well is not here, they don't think they have their own merit. They think they're depending on other people's merit. Moshe's merit, Miriam's merit, Aaron's merit, but not their own. They didn't think they were on, such a high level. Now, that makes it a little more hard to understand because, they did see the miracles in Egypt. They did experience miracles in the desert. They saw God face to face on the mountain. So how could they not have thought they were special? That they were on a higher, level. So it could be that, exactly what my Rebbe here says. That, there was some aspect or some blemish in their own belief in themselves, in what they could do, and where they were holding, that they didn't think they were worthy. So, if you go, you fast forward now 2,500 years. So today, in this generation, most people think what we do doesn't matter. Right? And that we've spoken about, a number of times as well. Nefesh HaChaim, famous student, Rav Chaim of Volozhin, student of the Vilna Gaon, of Rav Elijah of Vilna, brings down what we do matters. It goes into detail. Person does something, does an action, let's say makes a blessing, right? So that goes upstairs when he makes the blessing, and in his intention, whatever his intention was, and it gets slapped back down in this world, and all fruit trees get blessed, etc. So there's a physical and spiritual manifestation, of what we do, whether we're in the land of Israel or not, right? So there are repercussions, right? Simple repercussion is that a woman who's pregnant, God forbid, smokes crack, kid comes out deformed. There's a reality. It's not the kid's fault, right? But there's a reality. If you do that, this is the end result. If a person is with a woman that he's not allowed to be with, and they have a child's called a mamzer. The mamzer is somebody that can only marry somebody of that same union, or a convert. So that being said, is it the kid's fault? It's not the kid's fault. But there is a reality, right? There's an absolute reality, physical and spiritual. So, we walk around today, or, most people think, I say Tehillim, I say Psalms, does it really matter? It does something, doesn't do something. Well, I do it anyway. People have very little belief in themselves, right? Even in secular terms. In today's generation, there's a tremendous lack of self-esteem. People talk a big game, people say big things, but there's a very big lack, of self-esteem. In the spiritual world, it's even less. Now, it's not because of humility. In spiritual terms, if you think about previous generations, if you think about what the rabbis were like in previous generations, and what people learned in previous generations, we can't compare to them. This is the greatest generation of learning. There are more people sitting and learning today than since the Second Temple, but that's not saying much of the quality. Doesn't mean we don't have Torah giants in this generation. But we've lost something along the way, something tremendous, that we can't imagine. So we think that, what I do, okay, for this generation's worth something. But previous generations, no, it's not worth that much. In different ways. Because they were 10 times greater. So with everything going on in the world, the fact that people even can learn, and people know how to learn, and people know how to give over and inspire others, that's a pretty darn big miracle. Because once the Holocaust occurred, it's like, You had generations wiped out. In America, there was like barely anything there. So the fact that America got built up, the land of Israel got built up, land of Israel is where the essence of where Torah is. I mean, not saying you don't have Torah giants in other places, but this is where the essence of Torah is. So in that sense, we've come a long way. We have to, at the same time, the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says that we have to know what our place is. Right? Ethics of our fathers tells us, know what your place is. Means know what your level is. So I can think, I may be pretty special. Not me, just in general. If they learned and they know how to learn. But the Mishnah also over there says, why do you think you're so great? That's what you're born to do. Right? A person is born to learn. To learn the text of what our forefathers learned. And what was passed down generation to generation. Right? That's what we're here for. To pass it down. It's not how many shrimps we eat or how many ball games we go to. It's about passing down this eternal message. So that being said, we should feel pretty good. At least we know how to learn. But you have to look at it in perspective. In Rav Chaim of Volozhin, in Rebbe Chanan Wasserman, may God avenge his blood. In his yeshiva katana, for like 13, 14, 15-year-olds, in order to get in, you have to learn 200 pages of Talmud, front and back. There's like 400 pages. What 13, 14-year-old kid is going to get tested on 400 pages today? Not too many. I'm not saying they don't exist, but not too many. We're living in a very, very different, much weaker generation. But at the same time, since there's so much ignorance, amongst the Jewish people, someone who's sitting and learning, he goes to some far-flung place, wherever that is, he's like the Torah giant over there, right? If he's living back in the land of Israel, people like him are like a dime a dozen. People know how to learn, say ideas, make contradictions, this, that. The people may be much greater than him. But you go somewhere where nobody really learns, you are the exemplary person. You are the one to give over the Masorah, right? To give over what the Torah is, to give over the traditions. But doesn't mean you don't know what your place is. Doesn't mean that if you have a question, you try and answer it on your own. If you don't know, you have to go to someone bigger. Right? That's why you always have to have a Rebbe. You have to have a mentor. Right? To be able to get information from if you don't know what to do. So the blemish on these people, of that generation, of the greatest generation, they lack some element, of self-esteem. Now, if you were to ask them, didn't you see the miracles? They'd say yes. They said, didn't you see the fire and brimstone? Didn't you die and come back to life? They'd say yes. Generations after that never saw that. They didn't have a connection. Only what was passed down, what their fathers told them, what their grandfathers told them. But they themselves didn't see it. They themselves didn't see the miracles. Right? Or maybe some of them did. The later generation certainly didn't. They only heard the stories. The legends, of what happened. So, shouldn't they have thought they were something special? I mean, I'm not saying to be gaivadik, to be conceited, to think you're God's gift to the world, but, someone to ask them, well, didn't you see the cloud? Didn't you hear the sound? Didn't you see the sound of the shofar, which doesn't make any sense, as the Torah tells us, right? In the book of Exodus, they saw the sound. You can't see the sound, you hear the sound, right? But their souls, were on fire at that point. So they experienced things that normally in a human body you can't experience. So they go through this whole thing. Don't they know what their worth is? Don't they know what level they're on at that point? So the obvious answer is yes. They're not stupid. They certainly understand where they were holding. But nonetheless, they thought of themselves as lacking. They thought of themselves as not being on that level. Or being on a smaller level. So therefore they complain. They complain, we want meat. They complain, we want water. But through Miriam's merit, there was water, and it wasn't based on their own. So they claim we're not on that level. We're not on the level to live in a miraculous way. But up until this point, they've been able to. Okay, they complained here, they complained there. But they are living it. God is forcing them to live that way. But you see, there's still something missing. There's still some element, missing. So because of that, the fact that they complain, that's not enough to punish Moshe. The nail in the coffin, so to speak, is he calls them rebels. Up until that point, God says, fine, I'll look the other way. He calls them rebels and he hits the rock. Now, hitting the rock should not have caused them not to go in. Hitting of the rock is no less a miracle. So we saw before, using God's name, the ineffable name, and bringing out water, that is a bigger miracle. Seemingly, it's a much bigger miracle. Therefore, he's taken to task. Even though taking a stick and hitting the rock is just as big. Right? We would definitely think that is just as big. But at the end of the day, it's not. Right? As my Rebbe points out, that's not the case. And he's taken the task. Now, the other aspect of this is that even if this is all true, why isn't Moshe allowed to go in? Why is it this one thing? I granted, God says you didn't sanctify my name in public. Okay? That doesn't allow him to go in? I mean, that's pretty severe. God says, Moshe is my most trusted one. I speak to him face to face. He can come to me anytime. He's the most humble of all people. So this was a pretty serious offense. So the way I would look at it is like this. If a person be close to a king, right? Let's say a king is flesh and blood. Person is close to the king. If someone else is a minister, and he's like, 30 people removed, and he's like a lackey or whatever, doesn't have power, doesn't really have that much power. He does something wrong, okay? You get reprimanded, don't do it again, be careful, etc. But if his second in command screws up, whatever, doesn't matter what it is. It could be something even tremendously small. And maybe by other people it's insignificant. But the fact that he's second in command, you can't have any screw-ups. This can't happen. So even if it's something small, but in some way, it's like a slight to the king, or that it makes the king look bad, even though by other people, king wouldn't even bat an eyelash, if he's got eyelashes, right? He wouldn't even bat an eyelash. In this case, this person could die by having his head cut off. You say, but it's not fair. It's a minor offense. You're right. But see, if you're close to the king, a minor offense can be everything. It can be absolutely crucial. So, tzaddikim, righteous people, minor things that they do wrong, God's going to punish them much more severely. Because they're living in a different plane. They're like second in command. So they do something minor, it could be pretty severe. Look at Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva wanted to live his life based on divine judgment. God, when he created the world, wanted to only create it with divine judgment. When he saw man wouldn't be able to withstand it, so he created with divine compassion as well. So you have compassion and judgment working together. Now, by Rabbi Akiva, there were certain people, Rabbi Akiva, Yaakov Avinu, they wanted to live at a much higher level. They wanted to force themselves to be subjected to, much more difficult things to raise themselves to a much higher level. So that being said, they wanted to live according to strict judgment. So Rabbi Akiva, when we look at the end of his life, and for teaching Torah, he has his flesh ripped off his body. And he dies saying, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. When he says God is one, Rabbi Akiva dies, Talmud tells us. Rabbi Akiva, Muchen Mazumen, L'chai Olam Haba. That he's welcome, and he's welcome to the next world. Right, to the spiritual world. He's got a portion of the world to come. Right, he's prepared, he's welcome. But he had his flesh ripped off his body. You see by great people over generations. 10 martyrs by the keynotes, these horrific liturgical poems we read on Tisha B'Av. You see the 10 martyrs who were killed in a horrific way. One of them having their face basically ripped off. I mean, it's horrific. But they were judged to a higher standard. Right, there are other things going on. Right, we're not going to get into that now, but when a person's on an extremely high level and continues to raise themselves to an extremely high level, the punishment is going to be more severe. It's going to be more straight, more strong. And that's because they're closer to the king. Now I'd say, well, isn't it better? Maybe it's better I not be closer to the king. Maybe if I'm more ignorant, I don't work on things as much, God won't have any claims. Well, he'll have claims on that also. Because it goes according to what a person's potential is. If a person has greater potential and they don't live up to it, that's also bad. I mean, we all may never live up to our potential. That doesn't matter. We have to strive to try and reach as much as we can. But if a person's lazy and they say, I'm not interested in trying to reach a higher spiritual level, that's something else. And that's something else they're going to pay a serious price for. And that no one wants to do. Because at the end of the day, when a person dies, he's going to see his life flash before his eyes. Everything he did, thoughts, everything. And then the second movie is what you could have done. That is what Zohar says is like Gehenna, is like hell. Why? Because a person cannot get out of it. A person can say, no, I didn't do this. You might try and justify what you did. Right? And God can either say yay or nay. But at the end of the day, wasted potential is wasted potential. So at some level, we all waste a certain level of potential, maybe. All right, not everyone. There are people that reach their potential. But let's just say for argument's sake, a lot of people don't. So you have to try the best of your ability to reach whatever you have. Not to rest on your laurels. Next day is another day. To learn, to strive. We don't know what the next day is going to bring. That's why the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says you have to do tshuva every day. You have to repent every day. Because, tomorrow you may not wake up. You just may not wake up. So here, that generation made seemingly a fundamental mistake. Minor fundamental mistake. And that is, they didn't know what their worth was. They didn't know how special they were to the extent of what they could accomplish. They just didn't think they were on the level. Now, if you were to ask people, let's say, the process of conversion who convert, or people who become Bali Tshuva, right, born Jewish and then become, they weren't religious and become religious, and you see over time, great things happen to them. How much they learn and they strive and they change. So if you say, someone's in the process, 10 years, 15 years, after 15 years you say, look where you were at the beginning. Look where you are now. Tremendous thing. Doesn't mean we don't have room to grow. Right? But when a person sees that they learn, and each thing they learn are like building blocks. The building blocks eventually are going to build the person and give them the knowledge that they need. Now, it comes with a lot of sweat. It comes with a lot of prayer. You have to review, to constantly go over things. You want to remember what to do in the right situation. You got to know how to look up books and what to look for and all that. It takes a long time. It doesn't mean a person can't get there. At some level. How do I know? Because you're looking at living proof. So, you're talking more than 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So, I started from scratch. Knew how to read Hebrew. Didn't know what the words meant. Started from absolute scratch. Started from Mishnah. Went from Mishnah to Talmud to the Gemara. And the early commentators, later commentators. It took time. It took a lot of hours. A lot of effort. But at the end, I can say I'm holding somewhere. I know how to learn. That's a huge thing. From where I came from, that's a huge thing. Does it mean I'm proficient where I need to be? No. Does it mean I can't learn deeper in other things and think out things and, come up with all kinds of different ideas and whatever? Yeah, but you got to put your mind to it. You got to work at it. Doesn't mean you don't have distractions or other things, but it's something you got to fight for. Right? Anyone in the process of conversion, you got to fight. Because if you don't fight, you're never going to get there. It's an impossibility. It's just too hard. So every day you got to find time to learn. Doesn't matter, you're tired, you work, this, that. You got to find time to do it. And you have to make the effort day in and day out. Because when a person learns Torah, every day you strengthen yourself. And one day, let's say, one day you're just too tired, you can't learn, whatever. It's like you take 2 steps backwards. What? I just skipped one day. I only learned an hour a day, so I didn't learn an hour yesterday. Yeah, so your soul is lacking that hour, whatever it was. So you got to work twice as hard the next day to get it back. You have to keep working to get that back. Can't skip. Right? No cliff notes. I'm still looking for them. No cliff notes. You got to work. It's not like reading a newspaper. You got to think. You got to work things out. Does it make sense? Doesn't make sense? How does it make sense? But at the end of the day, you have to know what to do also. So you need to make, a combination of both worlds. Using your mind and practical things. I'm not saying using your mind is not practical. I mean, if a person's learning, and what you're learning may not necessarily be so practical, but you're learning to strengthen your mind and sharpen the ideas, what you understand. So that's good at a certain level. But you also have to know what to do. Right? So you need both. You need both. You need to focus on, both at the same time. It's not a contradiction. Right? But at the end of the day, you have to be motivated. And you have to keep that motivation going. So people ask me a lot, say, how are you motivated? I said, I'm just determined. I'm just, doesn't matter what's going on in my life. Every morning, get on that bus, go to Jerusalem, sit in my Rebbe's shul. I'm tired, I'm not tired. Things are going good, things aren't going good, whatever. That's it. Gemara's open, Chumash is open, other things are open. You just got to strive. You got to, as King Solomon says, Torah has to be something you want more than diamonds and rubies, gold and silver. Right? You have to want it. And you have to want it so bad that you'll do anything to get it. So the merit I've had, not based on my own knowledge. Right? I'm not tooting my own horn. It's only because of what God's given me. Rebbe Chanan said on himself that he only had average intelligence. So how did he become as great as he was, even as a student of the Chofetz Chaim? He became as great as he was because he just kept learning. He just kept going and going and going. And, he went through it again and again and again and again. And he looked at it this way and that way, and he thought about it. That's how he became who he became. Because he wanted it so bad. Even if he's limited by, average intelligence. But God gave him a gift. God gave him the ability to concentrate. God gave him the ability to be able to sit, for long periods of time. And to keep going over and over and still feel fresh. And still not say, I have to review, and review's not so much fun, and it doesn't matter. That's what he did. And that's how he became great. So, there's hope for all of us. certainly myself included, I have, many more goals that I want to accomplish. So, God's given me the strength to do that, and to continue going further. I want to mention that I also have an Intro to Kabbalah class, which I'm giving tonight, Tuesday night, 9 o'clock, New York time. We're going through the book Derech Hashem, the Way of God, and we've spoken about spiritual forces, why God created the world, the purpose of man, purpose of the nations, etc. Now we're speaking about the Shema and the blessings of the Shema. I also have conversion classes and Noahide classes. Take a look at my Facebook fan page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion and Judaism, or Beyond Noahide. I have 2 question and answer sessions, one on Tuesday at 10 a.m. in the morning, New York time, one on Thursday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, New York time, and all those I record. I put them on my Facebook page. And I also have a course that I made. It's called Discover Your Biblical Path, and it's about non-Jews coming out of Christianity or any paganism, want to know which way to go, either be a Noahide or to convert. So I have 6 modules, what it means to be a Noahide, what it means to be a Jew, how to find a rabbi, how to find a community, and 7 interviews of people that either converted or are still in the process of conversion, or people that were Noahides. You can also, there's a webinar I did on that. You can find that on my Facebook fan page also, or my blog. And anyone who wants to contact me, feel free. Contact me, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFF, I know, COFFMAN, because that's how my father spelled it, @gmail.com. Wishing everyone a great Shabbos.